Today, Australia's coronavirus death toll rises to 14 with the death of a 91-year-old woman from a Sydney nursing home. Also ahead, the federal government's new support package for struggling regional airlines. Queenslanders go to the polls in local government elections despite fears voters could be exposed to the coronavirus. And AFL players agree to a 50% pay cut until the end of May. The NRL still to reach an agreement. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Corowa. In news just in, a 91-year-old woman has been confirmed as the latest person to die in New South Wales after testing positive to COVID-19. The woman was a resident at the Dorothy Henderson Lodge aged care facility in Macquarie Park, where a number of residents and employees have contracted COVID-19. The number of deaths across Australia is now at 14. Confirmed cases around the country have risen this morning to more than 3,500. There are now 685 cases in Victoria after 111 cases were confirmed overnight. In New South Wales, there are 1,617 coronavirus cases. The ACT has 62 confirmed cases, while Queensland's total is now 625. In Tasmania, 59 people have contracted the virus, with another case study confirmed there today. 6 people are in ICU in South Australia, which has a total of 257 infections. Western Australia yesterday added 24 new cases, bringing the state's total to 255, and the Northern Territory has 14 cases after a police officer and his wife became the first people in a remote Indigenous community to test positive for the virus. The Victorian Premier is demanding people stay at home after the state recorded its highest daily jump of coronavirus cases. Another 111 people tested positive, bringing Victoria's total to 685 infections. Karen Percy has more from Melbourne.
Premier Daniel Andrews says 90% of those new 111 cases have come from those who've been overseas or people who've been in touch with travellers from overseas. That's why the Victorian government today has instituted on-the-spot fines for individuals who do not self-quarantine, who breach this quarantine rules from are coming from overseas, and they'll be fined $1,652. Businesses will also be fined up to $10,000 if they're found to have mass gatherings, or if weddings take place, they organise weddings or funerals. Individuals might also be fined for that as well. So Victoria now has a total of 685 cases. 22 were in hospital yesterday. As yet, we don't have an update on hospital numbers for today. The Premier today saying that it's not the day to do your usual Saturday errands. There's no need to buy sneakers. There's no need to go to the jeweller. And if you're going to the beach, do not stay at the beach. Police will be patrolling beaches and ensuring that people are not gathering in mass numbers. A number of councils around the state have in fact closed their beaches, so people will not be able to attend those beaches as well.
If you spend the day at the beach like you otherwise would have, all you'll be doing is spreading the virus. And all that means is our health system will be overrun and more people will die. If people just use their common sense, if people use their good judgment, if people use that sense of civic duty as well, do I have to do what I'm planning to do this afternoon, or might I do something different? The advice is simplest when I put it to you this way: if you can stay home, you must stay home.
New quarantine measures are going to come into place as of midnight tonight. The Victorian government has sourced some 5,000 hotel rooms and they will be taking people directly from the airport. They'll be bused to hotels. They'll be given food and other provisions they might need at their own cost. But if people are supposed to go on beyond Melbourne to other parts of the country, but if they go through immigration here and come through, they will not be able to leave the state until that 14-day mandatory quarantine period is over.
Queenslanders are going to the polls today in local government elections despite concerns over the spread of coronavirus. Reporter Josh Robertson is in Brisbane. He joins us now live. So Josh, what's the mood there among voters today?
Well, Miriam, leading up to this, they've received mixed messages. They've been told to stay at home and physically distance themselves from other people. And yet this election is going ahead. There's been weeks of speculation about whether it would. The government even passed emergency legislation to allow them to postpone them. But these council and state by-elections are indeed going ahead. Now, almost half of Queensland's 3.3 million registered voters have already registered their votes this week through the post and at pre-polling booths. In fact, yesterday, some of those pre-polling booths in inner Brisbane had quite long queues, and there were comments, that this made a mockery of, the social distancing measures that we've been all told to adopt. But other steps have been taken. For example, the usual throng of people doing handing out how to vote cards is not here. That's been outlawed. And voters have taken their own extra safety measures when going into the booths. We spoke to one voter, Trish Fitzsimons, earlier about the steps that she took.
It's a time when we've got to all do whatever we can to isolate. And so, I just brought my own pen and a rubber glove. I'll dispose of it afterwards. I tried to vote first last Saturday in the Harry's Road, Cooperoo, and there was a queue of about 300 metres. So I thought there was reasonable social distancing, not going to wait there. I tried again to vote yesterday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, I beg your pardon, in the same spot. And 500 metres, I reckon, was the queue.
Now, Josh, what have authorities been saying there today in Queensland?
Well, leading up to this, Queensland Health told the Electoral Commission of Queensland that it was quite safe to go ahead with this, that they could adopt safeguards, including having only one scrutineer per voter at booths. And that basically they could go ahead. We've had the federal MP Andrew Laming, who's also a medical doctor, say this morning that going and exercising your democratic right, going to the polling booth and voting is no riskier than going to a supermarket to get a carton of milk. What we're seeing so far at some of the inner Brisbane polling booths is that they're a lot less crowded than some of those pre-polling booths around town yesterday, and so we see voters trickling in. We did get one voter just before telling us that the voters at this booth here in East Brisbane were kind of momentarily, if they had not brought their own pens, they weren't having access to those because the booth was disinfecting them, cleaning them every 30 minutes. That voter told us that he chose to lodge an informal vote rather than stick around. But in general, people seem to be
Josh, we are going to have to leave you there. We're about to hear from the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian, and she's speaking in Sydney. Let's go live now.
The spread of the virus as much as possible. We know from our own statistics, we know from statistics around the nation that the highest contributors to people acquiring the disease are those who've overseas travelled or those who've had direct contact with them. And if we want to stop the spread of the disease, we need to better monitor everybody who comes from overseas. And yesterday at National Cabinet, as a PM articulated yesterday, all states have committed to isolating from midnight tonight anybody who gets off a plane in a hotel in New South Wales or any other state in which they land for a period of 14 days. I want to thank Commissioner Fuller, who on behalf of New South Wales will be responsible for undertaking this very big task. And I also want to say it will not be perfect and it will not be foolproof. We have on average, as the largest city in the nation, with the most overseas travellers coming in, we will have between 3,000 and 5,000 people coming into Sydney every day for the foreseeable future. Not all of them are residents of New South Wales, but having agreed to the National Cabinet arrangements, that means that if you live in a different state, you will have to stay in New South Wales for 14 days, and then you'll be allowed to commence your journey onwards. All premiers agree to this. So, for example, if there are New South Wales residents that get off a cruise ship in Perth, they will have to be there for 14 days before they can come to New South Wales. These are important arrangements, but I also want to stress how important it is not only for all of the authorities to work together well, which we have been, and I want to thank in particular Minister Dutton, with whom we've had conversations already today. I want to thank the head of the Australian Border Force, and I also want to thank the ADF, who'll be stepping up to support New South Wales in our efforts, because New South Wales certainly cannot do it on our own, and I'm really pleased the federal authorities have committed to supporting us in managing this huge task. And I'm really looking forward to our Border Force officials and Police Commissioner Fuller working together closely in establishing the new protocols moving forward and making sure they're enforced. But I also want to say that no matter how good our federal authorities are, no matter how good our state authorities are, it also comes down to individual responsibility. We will have potentially thousands of people in hotel rooms under self-isolation, and we do rely on them doing the right thing. We will have hundreds of police officers out there enforcing the orders that come into effect from midnight. But we also need people to do the right thing. Now, we understand that some people have had a very stressful time trying to get back home, and we really, really want to consider their position. But we also need to consider the health and safety of 8 million residents in New South Wales, and also more broadly 25 million people in Australia, because we know that when they come into Sydney, many people will then be going back home across the nation. And we have a big responsibility and job ahead of us to protect the health and safety of everybody living in Australia. But I also say to those coming back from overseas, please act responsibly. We know you're frustrated. It may have taken you a while to get back home, but we also know that some people have taken a while in making a decision to come back home as Australians. But when you do get back home, you will have a frustrating 2 weeks, but it's for your own safety and those of the broader community. And it's a frustrating time for many of us. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people haven't seen their relatives in a long time because of health safety concerns. It's really hard and frustrating for all of us. And so I say to those travellers, you need to bear with us, you need to do the right thing. There'll be enforcement procedures in place from both a federal perspective and a state perspective. But we're also asking people to do the right thing. And I'm not going to pretend it will be a perfect system. I'm not going to pretend that we're going to absolutely make sure that every single person abides by these rules, especially given the number of people coming in. But what I will say is that our entire police force is ready for the task, and we're looking forward to working with Border Force and also the ADF, the Australian Defence Forces, as well as all the other federal authorities involved, because we know that by working closely together, we can keep our community safe. And again, I want to thank Commissioner Fuller for standing up on behalf of the people of New South Wales from midnight. We were all a line in the sand, and from midnight, the police are officially in charge of managing the operations, as are Border Force and the ADF from a Commonwealth level. And we make sure that we keep our community safe by making sure people are adhering to those strict isolation orders. And we do it because we know, as I said, that the largest proportion of people acquiring the virus are bringing it from overseas. And then the next category of people are people they're having close contact with. So we know that if we do a really good job in containing the spread at that level, we do a better job in containing the spread in the broader community. I'll ask Commissioner Fuller to make a few comments, then I'll ask Minister Elliott, and then I'll ask Dr Chant to give us an update overall on today's cases and the configuration, and then we'll take any questions.
Morning, thanks Premier. As of 11:59 tonight, we know that additional restrictions will come in place in terms of returning travellers from overseas, and from a police perspective we welcome those. We know that there are very important Health Act and health orders in relation to people coming home at the moment, and that requires individuals self-isolating for 14 days, and there's an enormous amount of personal responsibility in relation to that. And whilst many people are adhering to those warnings and those health orders, that we know that some aren't. So taking this as a coordinated approach, partnership between Health, Border Force, New South Wales Police, Australian Defence Force, that we will take full hotel rooms and we will take people from bus, from the airport, after health checking. They will check in, they're not criminals, they're decent Australians returning home, and they'll receive food, and they'll have hotel rooms, they'll have communications, they will have positive health outcomes, and they will spend 14 days in that isolation, in a controlled environment. And why? That is because we know that they are the spreaders of the virus, and we need to stop the spread. I know it is challenging times for those people returning home. They probably just want to come home, they want to lay in their own bed, they want to see their family members, but the reality is that this is truly unprecedented times. We will treat these people with absolute respect and dignity, but we will need their support in terms of understanding this is about all the people of New South Wales now, It's not about individuals. The 14 days, again, I'm sure will be a challenge for them. And at times, perhaps the food isn't up to standard or they feel as though the bed's not as comfortable as their own. But they need to understand that we're trying to protect the community of New South Wales. New South Wales will lead this operation. We will lead the emergency, but we will work closely with health, all of the other agencies, particular Border Force and the Australian Defence Force. There's planning happening now. We were planning last night for this. We know there's around 3,000 passengers who land tomorrow as a starting point. We've got to health check them, we've got to transport them, we've got to check them in the hotels, make sure the appropriate support and security are at those hotels for those 14 days. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Tomorrow morning, the people of New South Wales will once again wake up to a new regime, a new set of rules and regulations. Those rules and regulations are not there to punish anybody. They're not there to issue intermittent justice. They're there to protect lives. They're there to save lives. Everything that we've done over the course of the last couple of weeks have been exactly that, to save lives, whether it be closing Bondi Beach, whether it be closing our pubs. These are there to stop people from transmitting diseases. I think the community can be rest assured that tomorrow morning, as we see police and the Australian Defence Force, particularly the Army, working together, they need to know that these sort of scenarios, these sort of situations have been exercised regularly. The police and the Australian Army will be able to work together hand in glove when it comes to enforcing these new regulations. And I think that what we need to do is respect them. When you get an order from the police or a soldier for that matter from tomorrow morning, you need to respect and comply. Over the last 72 hours, I've had conversations with police that have just broken my heart. I've spoken to police that have been abused. I've spoken to police that have been spat on. I've spoken to police that have been ignored just for doing their job. And their job is not to punish you. Their job is to save your life. And tomorrow morning, when these new regulations are brought about, when these new rules and this new lifestyle is brought about, just know this isn't going to go on forever. But what we have seen in the enforcement of this new set of rules is a professional police force working with a professional standing army, working to ensure that the community is safe. I'll now hand over to Dr. Chan.
Thank you very much, Minister. So the update for today is that we have 1,617 confirmed cases. This is an increase of 212 new cases since 8 p.m. on the 26th of March. 84,907 people have been tested and excluded. Tragically, we have had 8 deaths, and there's been a confirmed death in a 91-year-old lady from the Dorothy Henderson Lodge. In terms of ICUs, we have 22 patients currently in ICU and 147 people overall that are in care. As I've indicated, 22 of those patients are in ICU, but a number are in hospital and some are being cared for through our hospital in the home program. Thank you. Yes, it has. So the community transmission's gone up to 170 today, and I'm really very keen to reinforce those messages that the Premier has been providing around the importance of the adherence to the social distancing measures and the compliance with the isolation requirements. It is critical that we get compliance to see a downturn in that community transmission, and I urge the community to take this matter seriously and please comply.
Sorry, I've heard that's the issue. Are people ignoring? We're seeing people out on the beaches today. We're seeing people still running around in groups. Are people simply ignoring the warnings? So this is going to ultimately end in a lockdown?
Look, some people, most people, I have to say, in the community are doing the right thing. Certainly in my observation, I'm noticing most people have shifted their behaviour, have shifted the way they're moving around, have really adjusted their lives, as difficult as it is. And we're deeply grateful to those people. We're deeply grateful to everyone who's listened to our messages, who's listened to the guidelines we've put in place to keep them and their family and their loved ones safe. But there are still a proportion in the community who aren't doing the right thing. And that's heartbreaking. We don't want to have to make further further decisions based on the irresponsible actions of a minority. But it only takes a handful of people to do the wrong thing and have this thing spread. It only takes a handful of people to disregard the health and safety of others for this to spread. And as Dr. Chance said, we're keeping a very close watch on the number of people who are acquiring the virus through community transmission. If we can't trace the source of the virus, and in the main, until this point of time, they've been overseas travellers or their direct contacts. They're the largest cohort of people getting this disease. But if we see those numbers in community to community transmission go up at a rate that which we're not comfortable with, we will have to put in stricter measures. And we'd rather hold off before we need to do that. But if we need to do that, we will. And as I said yesterday and the day before that, I get daily briefs from the experts on what those numbers are telling us. We also get daily briefs on what people are doing. And I have to say, in the main, we have seen a major reduction in the number of people moving around, and that's a good thing, because unless you have to go out of your home, you shouldn't really be moving around.
Remy, you talk about this threshold and reaching it. Can we have some kind of clarity around what that is? I mean, businesses are just watching the clock, really waiting.
Yeah.
They're confused. They need clarity. What is the threshold, and are you going to close them down?
Yeah, can I say that this is an uncertain time for all of us, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but what we're attempting to do is make sure that every time we make a decision, people understand what it means for them. And we've been very clear on that to this point in time, and I have said that New South Wales is looking at stricter conditions in relation to people's activity if we don't feel comfortable that the decisions we made last week are making a real difference. We're starting to get in some information which suggests those actions have resulted in some positive results, but it's too early to determine whether it's enough. And that's why I'm putting New South Wales on notice, just to say, never ever will you have to worry about getting what you need. Never ever do you have to hoard from supermarkets. Supermarkets will always be open. Pharmacies, service stations, essential things that people need to do to keep the community and all of us going will always be in place. Please do not worry about that. But there are another category of things we do need to look at if we find that the announcements or the decisions we've taken last week haven't made a difference. We will need to do more. But also, can I say, the advice from the health experts was that if you make sure you isolate those coming back from overseas, that is a huge issue for us. So given from midnight we've changed policy around the nation about that, that also helps us to contain the spread. So obviously monitoring those overseas travellers in such close proximity, more so than it's been done before, will have a positive effect as well on the numbers and a positive effect on the spread. But if New South Wales needs to do more, and I'm heartened to say that National Cabinet, the Prime Minister and all the state premiers understand that New South Wales and Victoria in particular may need to move more quickly than the other states because of the number of cases we have. And there's certainly issues we look at, get advice from experts on a daily basis. At this stage, we're really pleased with a lot of effort that people have made to do the right thing, but I'm sure over the weekend, unfortunately, there'll be a proportion of people that don't adhere. They will be issued with fines. The police have been very vigilant. The police are fantastic at their job. We don't want them to have to do that, but they have been. They've been issuing fines to people doing the wrong thing. They've been making sure they have a strong presence around those areas where people are gathering. And without singling out a particular demographic, young people in particular can't feel that they're immune from the disease. Young people in particular who are around socialising can't expect that they won't be touched or a loved one won't be touched. And I know all of us are caring individuals, and even though you think you might be okay, imagine unintentionally giving the disease to someone you love or unintentionally giving it to someone who dies. None of us want to be in that position. All of us are thinking about that. All of us have to act as though we have the disease ourselves. So make sure you keep distance from people, unless it's your immediate family that you're always in contact with. All of us have to assume that we have it, so that we make sure we exercise precaution at every turn. This is the best way we can contain the spread, and the best way we can have some comfort that there won't be stricter conditions that people will find very difficult to live with.
There are reports already that some travellers coming into the airport last night have already been taken to hotels. Can you...
Yeah, look, there are various procedures already in place for dealing with what we've termed high-risk travellers. However, from midnight it will apply to everybody. So from midnight, the rules that have been in place for some travellers will be applying to everybody. So if you get off a plane at Sydney Airport or Perth or Melbourne or anywhere else, you will have to stay in isolation. I should say an international flight. You will have to stay in isolation for 14 days.
So who has been already put
That's already been happening from certain countries or certain. Well, to this point, for example, if people have come off certain high-risk ships or various places around the world, they have been put in those hotels under orders, under health orders.
Flights as well?
Some flights, yeah.
Off ships. The Norwegian Star, they were in Johannesburg, they've flown in, but they just went straight home yesterday without having to be quarantined, whereas others that got off the ship had to go straight into a hotel. What's the difference between those?
Sure, I'll get Commissioner Fuller to explain.
What's been done? Sorry.
So just to give an absolute assurance that anyone who comes into Sydney Airport goes through the normal process. They are assessed by health individually. They're also assessed by Border Force, and New South Wales Police does play a role in that. Everyone is given a card saying that they have to go home and self-isolate for 14 days. That's the minimum that happens. Others who may be considered higher risk because they've come off a cruise ship are offered accommodation, particularly if they were potentially on travelling. Now, these are one of the challenges that we face in relation to putting people into hotel rooms. We don't put police on every doors. We're not running a police state. And this is why it's so important that the new powers come in tonight to give police, government and the community certainty that people coming off these planes will go into hotel rooms and they will be isolated under broad security for 14 days. And that's why this is so important. But to be clear, everyone coming off a plane at Sydney Airport gets health checked and appropriately processed by Border Force. It's 2,600 people coming in today to Sydney Airport. There's about 3,200 going out. There are still lots and lots of movements, but the 3,000 people that will land tomorrow will go through the same assessment, but will be transported to hotel rooms and put under broad security arrangements. Again, we know that foreign travellers, Australian travellers returning home, are cause of this virus spreading. So these individuals do not have any symptoms of the coronavirus, and if they did, health would take them back to hospital and treat them appropriately. So we're just taking a high degree of care in relation to this. So that is important. Now, at the moment, we're sharing, hotel rooms at the moment with people who are not showing any signs. That's important to note that, yeah? They're just potentially higher risk because of where they have been. Now, why we're moving to the new model is that we will take entire hotel floors, we will take entire hotels, which means if we need a health response, then obviously other people in the hotel won't be concerned about potentially catching the virus. That'll be much better.
And this is where we will leave our viewers on ABC TV. You can continue watching coverage on the